Let's explore this break-even problem that asks you to tackle a couple questions under different alternative courses of action. Okay, so the problem you can see right here. Tannic Corporation's sales slumped badly in 2017, so it operated at a loss. And the company's income statement is provided down here. Now they give us some information. They say it resulted from 500,000 units of product sales for 2,500,000. Total costs and expenses were 2,600,000, right? We're given all this information here and had a net loss of 100,000. And then management is considering the following independent alternatives. So the first thing they're considering is increase the unit sales price 20% and don't change anything else. The second consideration is change the compensation of salespeople so that the fixed annual salaries of $150,000 would be reduced to $60,000, but they would earn a 5% commission. And we're asked to compute the break-even point for 2017 and then compute the break-even point under both of these alternatives. All right, now let me show you how I solve this one. So if I slide down here, you'll see that I'm using the information from above. And well, first, I want to restate 2017. They told us sales were 2,500,000, and I'll do this analysis in thousands of dollars so we don't have so many zeros on the screen. Okay, the variable costs were $1,590,000 for cost of goods sold, right? I'm just pulling the information from here, 92 and 68, right? So that comes to 1,750. Contribution margin, of course, is just sales less total variable cost. So if I take the value of what I had in cell C31 minus C36, I come up with that contribution margin. And then we subtract out the fixed costs, which were 550, 158, and 42. Now, what's interesting is that all of these costs are mixed costs. There's a variable component and a fixed component. That's certainly not unusual. All right, so if I slide on down, you'll see that I do agree that operating income was 100,000 loss, like they said. All right, now let's take a look at alternative 1 and 2 before we compute a break-even. So alternative 1 says they're increasing the unit sales price 20% with no change costs and expenses in sales volume. Now, first off, this tells me that they have a monopoly, or certainly there's maybe it's just a local monopoly, because I would find it very unusual that you can increase selling price without sacrificing some sales to a competitor that offers a comparable product at a better price for your consumers. But given that we'll just assume that there's no change in cost, volume, and sales, what would we have to do? Well, we take the 2,500,000 of sales and multiply it times 120%. There's our 20% increase in sales. Now, all the variable costs will go up proportionally, so we can, or let me say that again, the selling price goes up 20%, no change costs and expenses in sales volume. So the variable cost will not change at all, right? It would if volume went up, but if volume didn't go up and we only have a sales price, these costs would remain the same. Same thing with fixed costs. They're fixed. There's no relationship between their costs to a level of activity. But in this case, there's no change in level of activity anyway. It's just a selling price. And so what we see is we would then be operating at a profit. Now, let's look at alternative 2, which says we'll change the compensation from fixed cost of 150 to 60 plus a 5% commission. All right, so what that means is of that 158,000, 150,000 of that is a fixed annual selling cost, but now we're going to change that. It's actually fixed salaries, annual salaries. So we're going to take the value in C40 and then we're going to reduce the salaries from 150 minus 60. We're going to take 90,000 out of it, and you can see I'm doing the calculation there. Take C40, we were at 150, subtract 60 out, or it's going to, it's going to continue to have 60,000. It was 150, so the difference, 150 minus 60 is 90,000. We'll take 90,000 out of that number, it gets to 68,000. Now, the only other change in this second alternative is that selling expense now has a new component. So we have the existing 92,000 of selling expense, but now we've got to take the sales value and increase it by 5% to pay those salespeople a commission. So when I do that, 92 jumps up to 217, and we're still operating a loss. In fact, the loss is even worse. Okay, now let's move on to the break-even. Well, break-even is simply contribution margin break-even is fixed cost divided by contribution margin percentage or contribution margin per unit. When we use percentage, the answer will come back in dollars. If we use contribution margin per unit, the answer will come back in units. Now, I have lots of videos and examples of those, so you're welcome to look at those. But I will just use the contribution margin percentage so that we can get the answer in dollars, which is what they've asked for. So what do you see I'm doing here? I take C42, which is the fixed cost of $850, and I divide it by the contribution margin percentage, which is C37 divided by C31. Right? C37 is contribution margin, C31 is sales. That's my contribution margin percentage. When I do that, I get a break-even of 2833. Now, all I have to do now is copy that over to the other to the other columns, and you can see how break-even changes between the three alternatives. So certainly if we raise the price and do nothing else, break-even goes down. In the second alternative, break-even went up because it's clearly a step in the wrong direction from where we're operating at now. Perhaps if they lowered that commission to something lower, it might be beneficial, but or considered some other alternatives. But as it stands, the best alternative here is alternative 1. And this is how I approached this one. So I hope you found this beneficial.